Welcome to Mr. Disturbing. Tonight, we're plunging into the dark heart of the Appalachians with some truly unsettling true horror stories. That'll keep you up all night. If you're brave enough, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into fear. My name is Tyler Reese. I'm 29 years old, and until last year I worked as a wilderness fire spotter for the U.S. Forest Service. My post was in a fire tower deep in the Jefferson National Forest, near the Virginia-West Virginia border. A lot of people don't realize these towers still exist, but they do. Tall metal skeletons with small shacks perched on top, offering a clear view above the canopy. I lived in one for weeks at a time. No roads, supplies dropped off by ATV every few days, no running water, just a radio, a map, a scope, and the quiet. I liked it that way. I never minded the isolation. That was the whole point. I started the assignment in early summer. It wasn't my first. I'd done a season in Oregon, another in Arizona. I knew the drill. Scan the tree line every 15 minutes. Report anything out of place, log daily weather, stay put unless told otherwise. My tower was positioned over a narrow gorge called Raventon Hollow, known for frequent lightning strikes and rock slides. The locals called it Devil's Window, though I never asked why. I assumed it was just mountain talk. The first few weeks were uneventful. Thick fog in the mornings, deer wandering into the clearings, a few dry thunderstorms off the ridge. I kept my logs tidy, followed protocol. But then, around the third week of June, I noticed something odd. Every morning, just after sunrise, the same stretch of trees about 2 miles out, due north of my position, looked different. It wasn't anything obvious, just a section that always seemed darker than the rest, like the sun never touched it. I marked it on my map. A narrow band, maybe 100 yards wide, near the base of an old fire line trail. I called it in once. My supervisor said it was probably just canopy density, normal. But each morning the shadows crept a little further. One day I saw movement in them, something low, fast. Too fast for a bear, too big for a fox. It darted between the trunks, gone before I could raise my scope. I didn't log that. I just made a note in my personal journal. A few nights later, I was woken by a tapping sound on the tower stairs. I sat up fast, grabbed my flashlight, and aimed it out the window. Nothing there, just the metal grating below, slick with dew. I told myself it was a bird, maybe a raccoon, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next evening, just before dark, I spotted something through the scope. It was standing at the edge of the shadowed patch, tall, still, facing the tower, too far to see clearly. It wasn't moving, just watching. I blinked. Gone. The trees were empty again. I stayed by the radio that night but didn't call it in. What could I say? That a shape had been staring at me from the woods? That the shadows were stretching where they shouldn't be? But the worst part came the next morning. I went outside to check the generator and found something sitting on the bottom step of the tower. A stone, flat, smooth, and carved into its surface. A perfect spiral. Not recent. Weathered. Old. I hadn't brought it, and there was no one else within 10 miles of that spot. That's when I started to feel it, like the forest was watching back. I didn't touch the stone. I just stood there, staring at it. That spiral carved deep into its surface like it had been done with something sharp and deliberate. The edges were worn, rounded by time, but the symbol was clean. Exact. The kind of shape that sticks in your mind whether you want it to or not. I used the toe of my boot to slide it off the step. It landed softly in the dirt, and I left it there. I went back up the tower and locked the hatch behind me. I shouldn't have locked it, not for something like that, but it made me feel better. That night I kept the radio on. No calls came in, just the usual static hum and the soft hiss of weather readings from other stations. I kept checking the tree line every hour. The patch of forest to the north hadn't changed, but it felt different now. It was as if the trees in that section were leaning in slightly, bending toward something at the center. I aimed my scope at the shadows, focused in, and for a moment, I thought I saw something. A gap between the trunks, a space where there shouldn't have been one. A shape standing still, tall, thin, arms too long, head slightly tilted. When I blinked, it was gone. The shadows looked like shadows again. I didn't sleep. I watched the stairs through the window, my flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. Around 3 a.m., I heard the tapping again. Not quick, slow, deliberate. Step by step, climbing. I waited for the sound to reach the hatch, but it didn't. It stopped 4 steps below. I turned the flashlight toward the metal slats and saw nothing. Just dew. No footprints. No movement. But when I opened the hatch at dawn, the spiral was back. Another stone. A different one. Placed exactly where the first had been. I didn't radio it in. I just wrote another entry in my personal log. I told myself I could finish the assignment. Just 1 more week. But the forest had started changing. The days grew darker. The mist hung lower and longer. The wind came from the wrong direction. And every time I looked north, that shadowed patch grew. Not quickly. Just enough to notice. Like rot spreading across bark. Then the animal sounds stopped. Birds, bugs, even the distant yips of coyotes at night, all gone. On the 5th morning, I stepped outside and saw something on the railing, scratched into the metal, barely visible but unmistakable. Another spiral. Carved carefully, not rushed. It hadn't been there the night before. That evening, I finally tried to call out on the radio, just to hear a voice. Anyone. But all I got was static. Not even the automated weather updates. I switched channels, listened. Nothing. The tower had gone silent, and the silence felt heavy like it was pressing in from all sides. That night, just before I turned off the lantern, I looked out the window one last time, and my heart stopped. There was light in the woods, faint, orange, flickering, like fire. But there were no storms, no lightning strikes, and the light didn't rise like flame. It pulsed, in a rhythm, slow, deliberate, almost like breathing. I watched as the light moved, weaving between the trees, always just behind the shadows, never fully visible. And then I saw them, figures, more than one, moving with the light, not walking, gliding, silent, tall. Their arms hung too low, their necks bent forward as if straining to listen. I shut off the lantern, sat in the dark, listened to my own breath, and when I looked again, the lights were gone, but the forest hadn't returned to normal. It never did. I didn't leave the tower the next day. I couldn't. The forest below felt different now. Too quiet, too still, like the trees were holding their breath. I stayed by the window, scanning every hour, but nothing moved. No wind, no animals, not even the mist. It was as if the whole valley had gone dead. The radio was still silent. Every channel, every band, just empty static. I tried switching to the emergency frequency. Still nothing. I watched the sky grow darker that night and decided to keep the lantern off. I didn't want to be seen. I don't know how long I sat there, but sometime just after midnight, I heard the first sound in hours. The metal stairs. Not tapping this time. Dragging. Something heavy, slow, pulling itself upward, step by step. I crouched low, pulled the hatchet from under my cot, and waited. The sound stopped just below the hatch. I held my breath, listened, and then I heard it. Breathing. Slow, ragged, wet. Not from the stairs, from inside the tower. I turned, heart hammering, and saw the hatch still sealed. But something was behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. The windows were dark. The corner's empty, but I wasn't alone. I could feel it now, like the air had grown teeth, like something ancient and angry had stepped into the room and was watching me from just behind the edge of my vision. The air grew colder. The room felt smaller. I backed into the far corner and didn't move for hours. When dawn finally broke, I found a third stone sitting beside my bed. The spiral deeper this time, blood in the groove. I packed my gear in silence, left the weather logs behind, didn't report my departure. I hiked down the tower steps without looking back. The forest didn't stop me. It just watched. I made it to the trailhead by late afternoon, flagged down a state truck, told them the generator failed and I was being reassigned. I handed over the keys without another word. No one questioned it. That was a year ago. I live in a city now. Concrete, noise, no trees, no silence. But the spiral followed me. Sometimes I find it drawn in the dust on my windshield, carved into bus stop benches, reflected faintly in puddles where it shouldn't be. I haven't seen the figures since, but I hear them. At night, when everything goes quiet, I hear the dragging steps, the low, wet breathing. And once, just once, I saw light outside my apartment window. Not headlights, not street lamps, orange, flickering, like fire moving slowly through trees that weren't there yesterday. I shut the blinds, sat in the dark, waited, just like before. I don't know what I saw in that forest, but I know it saw me. And I know that some towers are built too high, not to see out, but to keep us from seeing what's below. Because once you've looked down into something older than the mountain itself, it starts looking back, and it never stops. My name is Cole Redman. I'm 38 years old. I live alone and make my living as a land survey drone operator, mostly working with logging companies and forestry services around the Appalachian region. I get called out to rough, remote areas where it's too dangerous or time-consuming for boots-on-the-ground surveying. I launch the drone, map the terrain, log coordinates, then send the data off to whoever hired me. I've flown over all kinds of terrain: shale bluffs, sinkholes, fire scars, and forgotten homesteads swallowed by trees. None of it ever bothered me. But there's a tract of land near the Kentucky-Tennessee border that I won't go back to. I don't care how much they offer. I got the job in early April of 2022. The client was vague. A private timber contractor wanting topographic data from a 900-acre parcel deep in the mountains, no road access, no cell towers, no surrounding development. I was told the land hadn't been touched since the 1930s. Old timber boundary, never harvested. They sent me the coordinates, a rough paper map, and an access key for a locked gate off a forest road that wasn't even on Google Maps. I drove 5 hours to get there, parked by the gate, loaded the drone, hiked about a mile in with the gear strapped to my back. The woods were dense, tall, dark, too quiet. I remember the smell first, like wet earth and old copper. It never faded, no matter how far I walked. The drone launched fine. I sent it above the canopy and started the scan. The data feed came through normally at first. But then, something was off. The elevation readings began to fluctuate, rapidly, like the land was shifting beneath the drone. I checked the visual feed. At first it showed what I expected: tree cover, ridges, some rockfall, but then the image stuttered, glitched, and for a split second I saw something. Not trees, not rocks, a shape, a perfect circle in the forest canopy, no clearing. Just treetops bent in a ring, as if something heavy had pressed them outward. I thought it was a rendering error, but then the drone lost signal, just cut out, gone. No GPS, no return to home, no battery readout. I tried relaunching from the saved coordinates, but the screen stayed black, dead. I packed up and decided to hike toward where the drone had last transmitted, hoping it hadn't crashed too far. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no squirrels, Just dead leaves underfoot and that thick, metallic smell. The woods changed slowly. At first, just less underbrush. Then the trees got straighter, taller, too straight, perfect lines, every trunk the same width, spaced evenly like they'd been planted. But no one had planted trees out there. I marked my path with chalk on the bark, white arrows, every 15 steps, something I'd done on other jobs just in case. But when I looked back after 20 minutes, the marks were gone. Not washed off, not scraped, just gone. The bark was clean, like it had never been touched. That's when I noticed the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Like a room just after someone whispers your name. I turned around to leave, but the trail didn't match what I remembered. The slope was wrong. The trees leaned differently. I walked faster. My heart was pounding. Every few minutes I thought I heard footsteps, slow, shuffling just out of sync with mine. I stopped, listened, nothing. But the pressure in the air stayed. By the time I saw the clearing, the light was already fading. The sun shouldn't have set yet. I checked my watch. It had stopped. Dead on 3:33. The clearing wasn't natural. It was circular. Perfectly so. The trees along its edge bent away from the center like something had radiated outward with enough force to twist them permanently. At the center of the clearing was something worse. A sinkhole. Wide, deep, edged with stone. Not natural stone, carved, angled, deliberate, like a well with no rope, no bucket, just blackness. And beside it, something shiny. My drone, intact, lying on the grass like someone had placed it there. I should have turned around right then, should have taken the drone and left, but I didn't. I stepped into the clearing like I was being pulled. Not physically, something deeper, a pressure in the chest, a strange stillness behind the eyes. The sinkhole was wide, maybe 20 feet across, but it didn't look natural. The stones forming its rim were smooth, black, slightly reflective, each one shaped to fit the next, like teeth. My drone was resting about 2 feet from the edge, sitting upright, undamaged. I knelt to grab it. The body was cold, too cold. The battery should have been warm from flight, but it felt like it had been submerged in ice. I stood up, and that's when I noticed the ground beneath me wasn't just grass. It was covered in symbols, dozens of them, faint but visible in the dying light, circles, spirals, shapes that didn't match any alphabet I'd seen, all carved shallowly into the dirt, surrounding the hole in rings like ripples. I stepped back slowly, looked up. The trees at the edge of the clearing looked different now, taller, or maybe closer, I couldn't be sure. The air had that taste again, metal, old stone, something sweet rotting in the heat. I turned to leave, but the forest around me had changed. Subtly. The trail I came in on was gone, replaced by trunks spaced too evenly, ground too flat. And then I saw the first one, a marking on a tree, a white chalk arrow, one of mine. But it was upside down. I hadn't drawn it that way. My hand started to shake. I turned and walked, fast. I followed the markings back, one after another, until they stopped. The next tree should have had a mark. Instead, it had something else, a handprint, wide, elongated, pressed deep into the bark. Too long, too thin, no nails, just an imprint, like the tree had swallowed it. The forest got darker fast, too fast for sunset. The light drained from the air like something had pulled a shade over the whole hollow. I took out my flashlight. The beam hit trees, moss, more symbols. But the sounds were worse. Not footsteps, breathing, far off, deep and slow, like something massive sleeping just below the surface. I turned and walked faster. Branches brushed my shoulders from both sides now. The trees felt closer, thicker. I kept the drone under one arm and the flashlight in the other. And then the light hit something ahead. A structure. Not a house, not a shed. Something older. A wall of stone set into the hillside. No roof, No doors, just 3 flat slabs forming a corner, like the remnants of a forgotten tomb. Moss clung to the cracks, but the stones were dry. In the center of the ground was another symbol, a spiral, but this one much deeper, cut into the earth, at least a foot wide. The soil inside was black, wet and undisturbed. I backed away, but behind me I heard something shift, a single step, slow. I turned the light toward it and saw nothing, just trees, just fog. But I felt it now, watching me, close enough to touch. I didn't stop. I ran. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I didn't care about orientation. I just ran, through thorns, through shadows, until I saw it, the glint of metal, my truck, right where I left it. I climbed in, locked the doors, and didn't start the engine for a full minute. Just sat there breathing hard. When I finally turned the key, the clock on the dash blinked once, then froze. 3:33. Same time as the watch, same time as the moment the drone feed had cut out. I drove straight out of those woods without looking back. Not once. But 2 days later, after I submitted the report and tried to upload the drone data, I found something else. A photo. Not one I took. Not a landscape. Not a map. Just a still frame buried in the memory folder. A single image of the clearing. From above, the hole, the drone, and next to it, a figure, standing still, facing straight up at the lens, pale, too tall, no face. I deleted the photo immediately, or I tried to, dragged it to the trash folder, emptied it. But when I checked the drive the next morning, it was back. Same file name, same timestamp, still there. I wiped the card, reformatted it, ran a full system purge, but the image kept reappearing, and it always had the same metadata, 3:33 p.m., April 17th. The day I found the clearing. The day the drone went dead. I stopped using the computer after that. The next week, I left town. Took a job across the state in Charleston, working indoors for a change. No forest, no drone work, just office lighting and the sound of people nearby. I thought that would fix it. Thought I could leave it behind like a bad dream. But the dreams followed. The first one came 2 nights after I moved in. I was back in the clearing, only the trees were taller. Wrong. They bent in toward the hole like they were leaning to listen, and I could hear something breathing inside it. Not fast, not loud, just steady, familiar. I woke with dirt on my hands, not mud, not soil. That black mossy dirt from the clearing. It was under my fingernails. I hadn't been outside. I hadn't left the apartment, but it was real. I started keeping the windows locked, the curtains closed. I taped the peephole on my front door. But then the spiral started showing up again, in small places, on a napkin, scratched into the frost on my bathroom mirror, on the fogged glass of the shower door. Once, I found it drawn in salt on the kitchen table. I hadn't bought salt. I swept it away and sat in silence for hours, listening to the hum of the fridge, waiting for the quiet to settle in like it had back in the forest. One night, around 3 in the morning, I heard something outside, not in the hall, outside the window. 3 stories up, a slow, dragging sound, like fingertips over glass. I didn't move, didn't look, but the next morning I saw the handprint, long, thin, pressed against the glass from the outside. I moved again, this time across the country. Thought if I put enough distance between me and the mountain, it would stay behind, that the spiral needed a place to root, but it doesn't. It just needs to be seen. A few weeks ago, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a flat stone, cold, heavy, spiral carved deep into its surface. And under it, a small strip of paper. No handwriting, just a timestamp. 3:33. Since then, I've started waking up at that exact time every night. And each time I hear the sound a little closer, a little clearer, the breathing, the dragging. And sometimes, in the dark, I think I see the trees again. Not real trees, just outlines. Leaning, bowing, making room for something to step through. I know I brought it back with me. Not the thing itself, maybe, but the pattern, the spiral. It's not a symbol, it's not a place, it's a path. And once you find it, it remembers, it watches, and it waits. Because I never should have picked up that drone, never should have looked into that hole, never should have seen what was standing beside me.